Welcome to the AUA News Inside Tract podcast. Today's Inside Tract podcast is part of the Voices series, which is brought to you by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Here we'll be joined in conversation with committee members, AUA members, and urologists from around the world to discuss how to build a strong, vibrant, and diverse urological community.
Well, thank you for listening to Voices. I am Dr. Gjanje Smith-Mathus, a female pelvic medicine and reconstructive surgeon at WakeMed in Raleigh, North Carolina, and also the founder of Susu Health Foundation. I am very happy to join you today as host as we talk with Dr. Jennifer Miles-Thomas, Vice Chair of Integration and Innovation at the Northwestern Medicine Department of Urology and the AUA's Treasurer-elect, about her journey to making AUA history as the first woman and woman of color on the board of directors and the importance of representation. Dr. Miles-Thomas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So we'll just get into questions. So first one, can you share what inspired you to pursue a career in urology and what led you to this point on the board of directors?
So in the field of urology, okay, to be completely honest, it wasn't even on my radar. I had a very normal childhood, did not have any significant urologic problems. So if you don't see it, you really can't be it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until medical school that some of my upperclassmen in med school were saying that they were going to apply to urology. And this was a field I knew really almost nothing about. I mean, of course, I've heard about stones, I heard about prostate cancer, but it wasn't on my radar. And to be transparent, I was wondering okay, so why would I want to do that, right? I'm a Black female. Why would I want to go into something that was predominantly male? And it was because I had no exposure. So I had no clue really what the field was in. So I did a rotation and I actually loved it. I knew I wanted to go into a surgical specialty. I thought it was going to be neurosurgery, but I also really recognized that I was a big believer in quality of life. And I've always been fairly strategic in my life. And so I thought about, okay, well, what if I no longer want to do big surgeries? What if I just want to work in the office? What if I want to just see kids? And I found that urology itself allowed me to have multiple different avenues. As I kind of changed and matured over the years, I would have some other options while staying in the same field. So I decided to pursue urology. I think my position on the board and the kind of my journey there was interesting because it wasn't planned. So, I mean, you can't start as a resident and say, oh, one day I want to be on the board of the AUA. Yeah. No, it doesn't even, that's a complete disconnect, right? Because residency and med school and residency is about survival.
Exactly.
That's really where I was at the time. But one of the things I noticed is that although we have excellent clinical training, most of us are clueless about the business aspects, right? Mm-hmm. We know that we're supposed to be very altruistic and we go above and beyond and we work nights and weekends and we sacrifice our bodies and our mental health to help others. Some of them we know, some of them we don't really know. Mm-hmm. But on the back end, medicine is a business and someone's making a lot of money off of what we're providing. So once I became the president and CEO at Urology of Virginia and we went through COVID, it was like a crash course of, you need to figure this out. Mm-hmm. There are 300 people who are kind of waiting for you to say, this is how we should navigate or maneuver through this pandemic. Yeah. And as you recall, nothing was clear cut at that time, right? Anything the government was putting out, it would change. There were new requirements. And then there was the whole thing with HR and vaccination. So there was so much going on at one time. I was like, this can't be how every industry runs. There's always emergencies and everything, oil and gas, banking. There's been a whole bunch of major things, But in our world, we're so siloed that when something hits us from the side that is not on our radar, we don't have the bandwidth and the backup and the supply chain in order to make it work. And so we're very dependent on the people, us, the nursing staff, the central supply to make it work, and sacrificing ourselves because the processes were optimized. They were optimized because we do more than our contract says.
Yes.
So once I recognized that, I said, well, I need to learn from others. I need to figure out, because I know everyone can't run this way, where there's no way people are staying until 10 o'clock at night to do work that should be between 8 and 4, 8 and 5. And so I said, let me go to business school. But let me go to business school somewhere that's not medicine focused, because if I'm trying to learn how other industries put together processes and do things, then I need to be somewhere where the other industries are.
That is brilliant.
So I did my MBA and learned a lot of frameworks, learned how to think differently, learned how to think outside the box. But also during that time, I learned a lot about financial accounting, financial management, which is different. I learned about how the markets work. I learned about innovation and entrepreneurship and how foundations of companies are built and run, and how you scale and how you partner. And I came back to the practice. Well, it was a executive MBA, so I was flying back and forth and basically using all of my vacation time for 2 years. But besides that, I survived. It was not worse than residency. So you can do anything if you can do residency.
Yes.
And when I came back, I saw the email regarding the treasurer. And I was like, oh, I feel like I have a very firm grasp now of economics and how business is run. But I was like, do I need to apply? And then I was thinking, what's the worst case scenario? I apply and don't get it. And then I started thinking, well, who else do I know that would be the best candidate? And I said, I don't know. I love a lot of people, but I don't know what else they do. I don't know what else they're interested in.
Yeah.
And I said, if the only sacrifice I'm making is time to complete an application, then what am I talking about? Right? Just do it. And then you see what the response is. If they don't want to interview me, that's perfectly fine. If they do, that's perfectly fine. But why am I even thinking twice about it? It's an opportunity. It would be great if I got the position, but if not, it'd be fine also. So I applied. I think it was very interesting because the boards I have been on previously were not for large not-for-profits. They're usually smaller companies, and they're usually coming to you only for when you're an SME or a subject matter expert, right? Yeah. So they're asking you one or two things. You're not seeing how the entire system works. This is very different. The AUA is actually run very, very well. And it's hard to see from the outside because, I mean, I was just like you, like, okay, well, I know there's an annual meeting and then there's still programs that are happening.
Pretty much.
Yes. But once you actually step inside, it's a very, very different model and idea. And there's a lot that's going on. And so I would say that I have a different impression. I definitely was involved in the AUA before. I mean, I've done podcasts, I'm at the meeting, helping with the business and leadership, but it's a very different vantage point to see a well-run organization and to think about everyone that you're trying to serve in all aspects and try to figure out what you need to put together to serve those members who may be different than you and have different needs, but how do you step back and figure out what they need?
Wow. I, for one, am so glad you went for it. So it's just so inspiring to see you in this role. And hearing your path to how you got to urology really resonates with me because I went to med school to be a pediatrician because urology was nowhere on my radar. So I met, some upperclassmen who were going into urology and did a rotation, and the rest is
Yeah, I think I mean, I think it's really, really hard because especially being women, it's, if you're not exposed or you're not in a med school that has a department or a strong department, unless you pursue it on your own, you're not hearing about it.
Exactly.
And then I guess the other thing I would say is both of us heard about it from upperclassmen, which means that we had the network, that we reached outside of our classes to say, hey, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? What are your experiences? Not everyone's going to be as outgoing to do that. So I think one of our roles is really to be really an advocate for urology. We know we need more urologists. We definitely need more urologists that are female gender. But it's hard if you can't see people who are like you. Even though we probably have different backgrounds, we definitely share some shared history. So it's hard to always be the only or the first. And it's great that we're here now so people can actually ask the real questions and we can help them navigate this process that if you've never done it before, you really don't know how to do it.
Yeah. And this ties nicely into my next question. What has your experience been as a Black woman in urology?
It's been very, very interesting. I like to think of myself as laid back, but comparatively, I know I'm not. So at least I have that perspective. I would say that I thought initially I would have a lot more conflict with patients saying, oh, I don't want to see her because she's a woman. And I would say that in some of my physicians, I found that even front desk team members would say, oh, are you sure you want to see her because she's a woman? People think that my first name is Miles and my last name is Thomas. So they were coming in sometimes, assuming that I was male. And then I was like, is this another way as a setup for discrimination? Like, I'm a fully board certified urologist. Patients can have preferences, but it shouldn't be our offices that are drawing that delineation. And so I really thought it was interesting to kind of figure out how to push back and to change those stereotypes. Because a lot of our staff are diverse too, and they've seen a lot and been through a lot. And they're probably discriminated against on a daily basis. Either you're young, you have kids, your educational state, where you live, like all of those things are their lived experience. And so when you kind of point it out to them people judge you immediately because you're X, Y, or Z. Don't judge me the same way. It's kind of an eye-opening of, oh, I don't like it when people do this to me. Let me make it a concerted effort not to. And I think it's hard too. Both of us are in female pelvic medicine and reconstruction, but just because we're women doesn't mean that that's what we're doing. So we could be pediatric urologists, we could be oncologists, we can be stone surgeons. Like we can do ED and infertility. And so I think it's important that all of us are seen. So it's not the assumption, oh, this is a female gendered urologist, so she must do female. No, I happen to love reconstruction and I happen to do female, but I'm pretty sure I'd be very good in oncology too. So I think we need to make sure that message is constantly out there so that our residents and our med students realize everything is available to them.
Absolutely. Speaking more, going back to being, we talked about the need to be the first of something, but, hopefully at some point we get to the point where being the first is a non-issue because there's so many of us in these spaces.
Yeah.
But, here we are. So what does it mean to you, to being the first woman and the first Black woman at that on the AUA's board of directors?
So I would say that I'm grateful for the opportunity. And I understand the responsibility, not just to the board, but to our community. To really understand how these decisions are made how we talk about things, how we change things for the future. I would say that, I mean, similar to you, to be the first, you're like, great, I get this opportunity. And then you're like, great, well, I have this massive burden to make sure I'm on point and do it right each and every day. Because if something happens or I'm not my best self, it's no longer just, oh, Jennifer Miles-Thomas messed up. No, oh, I'm not sure. The next Black female may be like her. I can't do X, Y, or Z. And it puts a lot of pressure to make sure that you always have everything together. And it's probably similar to the way that you grew up. You got to be twice as good to get half as far, right? So we put that burden on ourselves to constantly try to be, I mean, basically it's Black excellence, always doing more, always being organized, always coming with the research. We just never can show up, right? From everything from our appearance, because honestly, there are a lot of people who do not interact with Black women except in a superior role, right? So a lot of our admin assistants, a lot of our medical assistants, nurses, if people haven't been in environments where Black women are executives, immediately in their mind, they go to what they know and what's comfortable, which is completely different. Now we're peers. We're not your admin assistant, and how you speak, what you do, our expectations, what you share are completely different. And I think the more of us that become in these roles, the more and more comfortable people will be. Now, it's not our job to make people comfortable, but it is our job to be present and to understand why some of those barriers are there. It's because we've had a lifetime of being the only, so we can see what it takes and how much effort it takes to, it's not even assimilate, it's just kind of acclimate others to our world. And now that, I mean, the demographics of the US are changing and people are becoming more and more uncomfortable because they're realizing it's not, they can't stay the same. Like the world is changing. Other people are coming with different cultures and expectations and languages. And we do have to shift how we interact with people, how we speak to people, how we assume their backgrounds are X, Y, or Z. So for me, it's a great privilege, but it's also a great responsibility. I would say that, I mean, I spend a lot of time making sure I read through what the agendas are, make sure I organize my thoughts. And I mean, I don't know how many people are going to listen to this, but I'll just admit that I'm weird. One of the things that I do is I do listen to YouTubes for like self-improvement and self-education. Like, how do you think fast on your feet? When you're hearing someone give a pitch or making, doing a presentation, what should be going through my mind? How do I not zone out and not pay attention? Because I'm expected to have a educated conversation about what they're delivering. I should have pre-read the information. A lot of times we go to these meetings and we are given all this information. We're like, oh, I'm exhausted. Let me just kind of flip through it. No, you have a great responsibility. If you're making decisions that are going to affect thousands of people, then you need to understand the information and come up with educated questions and explanations for why is this X, Y, or Z. So I would say it's a great privilege, but it's also a big responsibility. But hopefully during my tenure, I will live up to it.
I have no doubt that you will.
No pressure.
None whatsoever, because you understand the gravity of the situation and the importance of you being in this space at this moment in time and what it means just to all of us. So I have all the faith in you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, and speaking of the board, so how do you think your presence on the board can help shape the future of diversity and inclusion in urology?
I think my perspective is just a little bit different. I think if you look at the business world, diverse boards of the public companies do much better. It's because you have insights that other people don't have. And it's not because they can't have them, it's just you have a different experience. The same reason Europe requires a certain number of female board members on their larger companies. it's the more information you have, the better decisions you make. So I feel that my presence and my experience, and my experience is a little bit different, right? So it's coming from a small health system employed physician to a large LUGPA group, working there for 10 years and becoming president and CEO. And now back in academics in a large health system in a major city, I have many perspectives as practicing urology, seeing how the workflows are, seeing the different patient populations. Like I feel that I am able to connect with many different members and member demographics. And so just my insights of how things are done across the country may be slightly different than others. And I'm a pretty vocal person. So if I have an opinion, I will always respectfully share it. But I think I'm also the person who will listen to the other opinions and then see, this is what we have in common. This is what we have that's different.
You know, and the importance of that different perspective cannot be overlooked. I came across this thing a couple of years ago now, and I'm kind of hazy on the details, but it was about, I think it was Apple, and I hope if it's not Apple, forgive me. But this smartphone was, working on selfies or screenshots or something. And they noticed that once it was deployed, a lot of people were complaining that their pictures were all upside down. And it turns out everyone who worked on the project was right-handed, and they didn't account for the users that would be left-handed. And it turns out when the left-handed users used the phone, their pictures all came out upside down because there were no lefties on their team. So, it's like, I know we often think of these things in terms of race and ethnicity and gender and whatnot, but that to me just spoke volumes, about the importance of diversity and inclusion and having different perspectives in these spaces. So if you were to meet a young woman aspiring to enter urology or any similar male-dominated field, what advice would you give?
I would say, do it. I would say you are going to make sacrifices that others are not asked to make. Know that going in. Choose what you want to sacrifice and choose what you're not willing to sacrifice. There's always a way to get it done. And create a village. I think a lot of us came through this process during a time where there weren't that many of us. And so it was a little bit more difficult to create that village and people you can bounce things off of, and people that created those safe spaces saying, am I reading this right? Or this person really say that to me type of that conversation, right? But I think now with social media and the fact that the residents and the med students are much more connected across the country and the world than we ever were, that once you're in that community and in that safe space, you all could travel the journey together because there's backup. There are people you could talk to, you can vent with, you can hang out with, and there's this level of understanding of what you're going through. But I also would say that make sure your network is on multiple layers. So like if you're a resident, there should be med students, undergrads, as well as attendings and retirees. So you really want to get the knowledge from the entire village because that will help you on your journey.
Absolutely. I know we've been talking AUA board. When I've talked to students about this, I tell them it's like having a board of directors of mentors.
Yes.
That each have a different need that they meet. And that you also have something to give as well. I love it. So looking at the field of urology, say the evolution over the next decade, how do you envision the field evolving? Especially now that, in 2024, there's an increased focus on diversity and inclusion.
I see that the field will look different in 10 years for many reasons. I think who's in the field will be much more diverse. I think it's happening now. In the past 5 years, I've been pleased. There are people who look very different, speak very different, have different genders, gender pronouns, and I feel culturally we are a lot more accepting than I would have said 10 years ago. So on that front, I think we are doing better. I don't always want to say well, I'm saying doing better.
Better. We'll take better.
I think we are going to continue to see our massive workforce shortages. And it's just because we haven't gone back to basics. What do people actually have to learn in what timeline? We are very, very rigid in medicine, and this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we've always learned it, and this is the path. Well, if you don't have enough people to do the job, you have to figure out other ways to do it. So I think innovation of education is going to happen. We're going to have to figure out more efficient ways to teach people how to care for others, the surgical techniques. I even recall during my residency that we were on the line team and we had to draw labs if the lab rounder couldn't get it. And I'm thinking now, is that the best use of a resident's time? Yeah, if the patient is critical and it needs to happen right now and you're there, no question. But how much time did we spend? How much time should we spend? I don't know the right answer, but I think we should really look into it, because if we're going to have a significant deficit of surgeons, of urologists, while the population is aging, we're going to have to figure out some other plan. I hoped to not use urologic services in the future, but I really hope that there is someone to take care of me in the future. So I think one of our strengths is we are outside of the box people. We're known as innovative surgeons. So I think we need to do it for ourselves, our own education, as well as patient care.
Yeah, and I agree. The field is going to have to evolve to meet the need. Absolutely. All right. Well, so this next question is near and dear to my heart, and you'll see why. So how important has mentorship been in your career? And how are you paying it forward to the next generation of urologists? I know you've been quite a resource to me personally, and a mentor in more ways than you may have realized. So I am excited about your response to this question.
So this is interesting, and I'll try to be as honest as possible. I think the way that mentorship in my world evolved was more of assignment, right? Someone was assigned to me, and we weren't matched because of interests or anything else. It was more of like, hey, you need somebody, this person will be your mentor. As I've grown personally and professionally, I realized that that's probably not always the best alignment. There should be something on both sides, and that relationship needs to be built over time, but it should be that both sides benefit from the mentorship, which I completely separate from sponsorship. So I've been sponsored as well as mentored.
Yes.
I would say that giving back for me is an automatic. I didn't have many people. I could probably name them on 3 fingers that I knew that were women further ahead who I would meet somewhere and could talk to about just what's the reality when I'm done with like residency and I'm out in the workforce, and what should I look for and how not to get abused, things like that. I've had many male mentors who were exceptional. They really wanted to hear how I thought, and they became sponsors too, and kind of paved the way and gave me opportunities I didn't even know were available. So in my mind, my biggest asset is making myself like available. Right? It's hard to reach out to people because you're like, oh, I don't know. Are they going to just like ignore my email? Or are they going to listen to me? Can I reach out? Yes, I am available. I feel like I'm in that phase of, I'm not that old, even though I feel old, but I'm in that phase of life where initially you need someone to provide that to you. Then you're just surviving, especially if you're married and have a family, because you're just doing so much for so many other people. And then you go into that phase where your goal is to give back. It's how can I help? I've already met some of the goals I had. How can I help other people reach their goals? And that's what you get your energy from. That's what you feel good about. Just helping them navigate the world in a way that it's going to be slightly different than your world, because things are always changing, but you're giving them different perspectives, and you're introducing them to your network, and you're showing them the possibilities, and you're telling them you can do it. It seems super hard right now, and I know you just want to like go to sleep and be done with this and not deal with all the stress, but you can do it. And the other side looks so much better. The control of your time, the control over your own practice, the control over basically your body of when you can come to work and when you go home. It's night and day. So I always wanted to be that resource. And it's probably from my parents and my grandparents. I kind of saw as time moved on what they started doing with their life and how they gave back to communities. And that's what I feel one of my roles is now.
That is excellent. And I, for one, can totally vouch for you when you say, reach out if you need anything, and you will be a resource, because you truly have been that for me. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
So as we bring this in for a landing, what do you hope your legacy will be, both in the field of urology and as a trailblazer for women and underrepresented groups in healthcare, like in general?
So I would say for my legacy in urology, I hope to change the field by doing things differently and allowing people to see there are many ways to help patients. There's many ways to run a business. There are many ways to give back. So I want to change that perspective and say, be flexible, be open, be innovative. So that's what I hope to contribute to urology. For women in this field, I hope to let everyone know that you can have it all, just not at the same time. And you have to figure out what you're going to give up when, and you need to figure out how you're going to get it back so that you could be your whole self. I'm not just a wife. I'm not just a mother. I'm not just a Black female urologist. Like, I am a whole person who likes things. And I think I'm rediscovering myself of what I like to do and what I don't like to do. And I'm pursuing that. So you can rewrite your own history by figuring out who you are and what you actually like to do, what you love to do, and don't sacrifice your whole self for others.
Wow, that is excellent advice. And I really like what you said about you can have it all, but not at the same time. Because that is so true. I think people miss that part.
Yeah.
And the part about letting stuff go, but you having when do you want to get it back? If it's something you want to get back.
Exactly. Some things you can just let on go. But yeah, I think that's one of the things too, is like we always rise to the occasion and expectation. And especially like Black females, culturally, we are like the matriarchs of families and people depend on us. And that's part of our identity growing up of we're the ones when things go down, we're the ones who kind of swoop in and help and organize and communicate. But that does put a toll on us. Yeah. And many others don't have that same responsibility. So in this kind of phase of my life, when I'm an empty nester and my kids have somewhat launched, I mean,
someone is great.
Exactly. I'm really spending a lot of time rediscovering myself, what I like to do, what I like to listen to, what I still want to learn related to maybe it's medicine, maybe it's urology, maybe it's life, maybe it's just travel, maybe it's people. And I think the more interesting you are, I think the more grounded you are, because not every day is going to be rosy. You're going to have these setbacks. You're going to have these days where you're like, nothing, just like every patient had an issue, cases didn't go well. Like those days when you're down, you're just taking the hits. If you have figured out what you truly love to do and who else you are, you can get back up. You can go for that walk. You can listen to that podcast. You can go and dance. You can go and sing. You can eat. I mean, that's not the best one, but I still like food. But that brings you back to, I'm not just defined by one thing in my life. I'm truly multifaceted, and I'm still excellent.
Thank you so much for doing this interview. I have truly, truly enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's like whenever you just have a conversation, you sometimes forget it is being recorded. So hopefully this comes off with the intent that I intended to be, just very open and very transparent. But I'm a structured person, but I'm learning to let it go, and just be open. So thank you very much for inviting me.
This was great. I appreciate your transparency and just the insight into your path and thought process and all the brilliance that's packed into that brain. Thank you for.
Thank you very much.
This has been Voices, an AUA News Inside Track podcast, and is brought to you by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. For more information about the AUA's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, visit auanet.org/diversity.